To remove the intake manifold here, we're gonna have to take off this hose, at least at this connection here, and that's gonna be a 7/16 for the nut in my case here. You're gonna have about 12 bolts, 6 on each side. This is gonna be a 1/2 inch socket to remove that. Gonna be along here and along here. These two here might be a little bit tough. You might wanna take some care trying to get those out. They might break. There's a corrosion factor on these two here. The other ones usually are pretty good, and hopefully you won't have any trouble in the ones in the back. There's the fuel line here, and you want to get in with something and just pop this keeper off of here. So that's just a keeper that holds that fuel line on there. Now after you've done that, you're gonna need a tool like this to slide on here, and then it goes in, and then that's how you're gonna get this disconnected. There's gonna be a little slice in there, and that's how you're gonna fit that around the end. And once you fit that around the end, you wanna push this in to here while you pull this off, and then this will disconnect. You can see there where it's been disconnected, and here if you push this back, see that's gonna go up against this stopper here, and on the inside there's that mechanism in there, and that's what's locking it in place, I guess. This fits inside there, I think, to open that up, and then that'll pull off of there. Anyway, you find one of these at some tool store, fuel line disconnector tool. So once we've disconnected the fuel line and this hose and removed all of our bolts, we should be able to pull off or pry off the intake manifold here. Here's a look inside with that intake manifold removed. We got quite a bit of gunk at the back there. This is a good time to find a towel or some rags or something like that to lay down in the valley here. The tappet covers are removed, and that'll be a 7/16 deep socket to remove the majority of the studs, because there's a threaded portion that sticks up top, and that's going to hold little brackets for spark plug wires and wires like the wiring harness and things like that. We've got one of the cylinder heads off, and before you attempt removing the cylinder head, there's some ground straps in the back. There's one on this head and there's one on that head. And there's you can see it under there, it bolts to the firewall. So you want to disconnect those, and there's also going to be, where this plastic piece is, that bolts to the back of the cylinder head on the driver's side. You'll need a 1/2 inch socket to remove those bolts. That removes the tappets. Then we can get the push rods out, and I want to take those out. I don't want to damage the push rods when I'm lifting the head off. I take those off, take the push rods out, and then the rest of the bolts right here, there's a line of them inside the head, and then there's another line of them down on the bottom here on the outside, and those should all be a 5/8 socket to remove all those bolts. Once you've done that, you may have to pry off of something in here just to break the seal to be able to pull it out. There's a look in there on what it's like. You could still see the antifreeze. Unless you pull the plug out of the block to drain the antifreeze out of the block, which I did not do, you're gonna make a mess down below. You pull the head and all the antifreeze is gonna come pouring out of there, make a mess on the floor. So probably a good idea to find that plug and pull it and drain the antifreeze out of the engine, so you're not making, it's a controlled mess. You're not spilling antifreeze all over your shop. And right here's a look at the cylinder head and the shape that it's in after we took it off. We've removed both the heads there. Things are looking pretty consistent on both sides. The one thing that did stand out though was the driver's side over here in general was a little bit cleaner throughout, versus the passenger side had a little more sludge and buildup, looked like, within the head. When I'm talking about that buildup and sludge, this is what I'm referring to here. There's a little more crud on the passenger side than what we have on the driver's side, and that's throughout the head. That's also with the rockers as well. You'll see here, this is the driver's side, and those rockers are relatively clean. But when we take a look at the passenger side, they're just a little more dirty. got a little more sludge and stuff built up on them. Here's a comparison of the heads here. We're going to take a look at the combustion chambers and the spark plugs. This again is the passenger side, and then over here is the driver's side, and they pretty much for the most part look pretty consistent across the board, except we got some fouling going up here that might be a leaky valve seal. We know the vehicle was burning antifreeze, and the way we know that is because our jug over there remained full, which was deceiving, because if your jug isn't going down, right, you think that everything's good. But when you opened up the cap here and took a look, there's no antifreeze to be seen inside the radiator. That means that somewhere in here, this isn't opening up to release the fluid in from the jug, because this is our hose from our overflow right there, and then it goes to here, and then there's your spring activated valve, I guess you'd say, right? So this would have to open up to let more coolant come in. So that, for whatever reason, we weren't getting that. And that's why we have antifreeze full in the jug, and we have, when we look down in there, we don't see any antifreeze. With the antifreeze low in the rad and there's no external leaks, that means that it has to be getting burnt up in the combustion chamber and exiting the exhaust. Now another telltale sign of that is you're going to have like white smoke, and it's not like, we're not talking heavy white smoke either, right? But you take a look in the back, and you might miss it in the winter time because it's cold out, and then, you know, you'll see the exhaust coming out in the winter time, and you just naturally assume it's just because of the temperature, and you can see that exhaust because the temperature extremes, the exhaust is hot, it's cold outside, represents as white as you visibly see it. It wasn't heavy or anything like that, just a mild white exhaust that was coming out. And that is what targeted the removal of the heads and replaced these head gaskets. Now, when we take a look at the head gasket, you know, I was expecting to see something broken in here from the ring here to one of the coolant passages. I'm not necessarily seeing that, so I don't know if it migrated underneath the gasket or how that worked out, but I'm not seeing an extreme blowout of the gasket anywhere here. We take a look at the head here, and I think if you take a look, like the gasket material is like stuck to the metal. It's stuck really good on the driver's side. The gasket was stuck really good to the block. It basically came off pretty easy on the passenger side over here, but you can see where the material is still stuck on the head here. And what I'm looking at is like a condition right here where you don't see that material, and it could have been coming in here underneath the gasket, is my theory, is that, you know, we don't see an obvious break from here to one of the coolant passages, but if it was migrating underneath the gasket, it could have gotten in that way. And that's what I'm looking at, is where basically where the material is separated, and it's kind of probably worked its way in somehow like that, is what I'm thinking. The point being is that we know that it was burning antifreeze, and this is a look at the condition of the equipment from that problem. When we take that gasket off there, you can see where it was adhering to the metal really well. You can see all the material that's still left attached to the metal. Obviously, that was a really good seal. The only thing that I can find is on both sides, kind of in the back here. If you take a look right there, there's a coolant passage, and there's not very much material between that coolant passage and where it goes into the combustion chamber there. And it looks like it could have been weeping underneath the gasket in that spot on both sides. If we take a look again on this side, you can see the same thing. You see where all the material is stuck to the metal really well? Well, in there, in that really small space, it looks like it could have been seeping in there underneath the gasket, because the material is missing there. The adhesion, I think, had failed, and then maybe that's where the coolant was coming in. This was a really small leak, because even though the coolant was going down, it wasn't really noticeable really fast. It progressively got worse, but in the beginning, it's not like it's going through a lot of coolant, so it must have been a small leak as well. Now when we look at the gasket, you could also see here, you see where that's lifting up? That's pretty obvious. If you take a look at the rest of the gasket on both of them, it is adhered really well all the way around on all of these. There's no other spot where it's lifting up like that. So I think we found our location of where the leak was coming from. It's not as drastic and obvious as one would expect, but that is, I do believe, what was causing our leak right there. Now when we identify that leak in this cylinder, we take a look at the spark plug, and some of the information that I was looking at was saying that the spark plug would be clean because the coolant is basically kind of like steam cleaning the combustion chamber. If we take a look, you can see that spark plug there. It doesn't look too bad. That one, this one's fouled, and that one there. Now if we notice on the passenger side, there is a clear difference here between how the spark plugs are looking on the driver's side as compared to the passenger side here. But we just show you that as if that's going to be an indication from the point of the leak. As we're cleaning up this head and we can see where we had that fouled spark plug, you can see that our oil seal valve for the valve stem, that's pushed up. And we see in there that one's pushed down and this one is raised up. It looks like this one's raised up as well. That one looks all right. That one seems all right. That one's raised up. That one's okay. That one's okay. That one's all right. And that one's okay.